Okay, well, I'll just recap. I'll just go over the map of France a little bit. As I said, it's a six-sided country. They call it the hexagon. It's about as big as Texas. Borders on the English Channel, and the southeastern port borders on the Mediterranean Sea. The southern border with Spain is the Pyrenees Mountains, and the eastern borders with Italy and Switzerland are foothills of the Alps. So today we're going to talk about three cities. One south of Bordeaux in this area on the map. I'll put the cursor on it too. The Bay of Arcachon. Then we'll go to Nice and then to Annecy in eastern France, which is not far from Geneva, Switzerland. This is the Bay of Arcachon, Bassin d'Arcachon, and the city was a holiday city built in the 1800s for the nobility of France. The trains were coming into fashion, and the rich people wanted a nice seacoast village, and it wasn't really well developed, and they chose it to become the new playground for the rich. So it's a very prosperous town. And near it is La Teste de Bouche, which is a little suburban area, kind of the way there's Binghamton and there's Vestal and there's Endicott. And La Teste de Bouche is Binghamton's sister city. So I've traveled to this area twice or more with the sister city group. And then also Union Endicott High School had an exchange with the high school, the private high school in Arcachon. So some of the students who lived on this long pointy area of land could take a water taxi to school, which was very cool. That was easier than their parents driving them all the way around the bay to get them to school every day. The most famous landmark is the Dune de Pila. It's a sand dune. When you look at pictures, you think you're in Saudi Arabia, but you're not. You're in Western France. It's a natural phenomenon that's actually growing all the time, slowly, but growing. At the base is a pine forest, which is gradually being buried little by little in the shifting sand. But it's a lovely spot to climb up the stairs and sit at the top and look at the Atlantic at the sunset over the Atlantic. It's a nice site for marriage proposals, weddings, picnics, all sorts.
Where's that sand coming from?
Probably when it rains in that area, sand comes down in the rain that comes from the Sahara Desert. So after it rains, people have to sweep the sand off their driveway because it's close enough to North Africa and the weather. And it's interesting when you look at the weather reports on television because they're really quite close to Africa, but you don't ever really think about it. Let's see. The region's famous for cultivating oysters. This is taken at low tide, and these are oyster. Let's see. These are Caban Chanquet. Anyway, the workers, if you're harvesting oysters, there's a lot of work you need to do, and it's annoying to have to take your boat back to shore to take care of it. So they build these cabins. When the water comes in, they're isolated and all surrounded by water. But when the water goes down, they can walk back and forth because they built them for a practical reason to do the things they needed to do to cultivate the oysters. This area sends oysters all over France, particularly at Christmas time, when it's customary for oysters to be part of the Christmas dinner. Here's a picture of a man working with I didn't take this picture, I found it on the internet. I had an opportunity to go out at 4 in the morning with a fishing boat, but so far I haven't taken that up on that. And Anthony Bourdain, the food writer, was born in the United States, but he had French relatives. And when I read his book, I was surprised to discover that as a youngster, he had come to Arcachon to visit his uncle. And he was 12 years old when he ate his first oyster. And that's what did it for him. And his life path as a chef and as an author was that one taste of an oyster when he was 12 in France with his French relatives. So here's how they're served, obviously. And we would bring the students, the UE students, always to a little cabin by the side of the sea and offer them a chance to eat oysters and to see their reaction. Generally, often it was a first time experience. This is an aerial photo of the high school, the private high school with which we had the exchange. My colleague, Krista Gaditzi, had set this up probably 13, 14 years ago. It's a beautiful private school. It's built as a hollow square there was a large church attached, a chapel, which is not really used now so much for religious services, although it was when the school was founded. Now it's been repurposed into a sort of theatrical use and conference rooms and that kind of thing, which caused a certain amount of discussion in the school as to whether that was right or wrong. But it's very close to the sea. The students on lunch break, which can be from an hour long to 2 hours long, can walk to the beach at lunch if they want to. And since the school's built around an open courtyard, the students can go out for walks in the middle of the day. The schedule is different to America. The classes are 50 minutes long with a 10-minute break. So they always start on the hour and stop at 10 minutes of the hour. And if a student has no classes in the first hour, or a teacher has no classes in the first hour or two, they don't need to be at school. Also, if a teacher is ill, there's not a substitute. The students just carry on, do something else.
Is that sand?
No, well, it's gravel, actually. I remember it as being gravel, but it looks very sandy, very fine.
Wow.
Very fine. And I think the trees are plane trees. We were there in April and they hadn't leafed out yet, but they look funny.
Yeah.
And you see them in Western and Southern France. And in the spring, before they leaf out, they look really, really strange. But Teddy, I think you're right. I think there was a sandy surface.
It's just reflecting. Yeah, it is sandy.
Oh. The students could walk around and kick a soccer ball and get exercise in the 10 minutes off class. And it was sunny and moderate temperatures. Also, they could buy snacks and so forth. Anyway, and there was a really nice faculty lounge that was a lot like this room, with a coffee machine where you could get espresso and coffee and cafe au lait, and teachers who were breaking the rules could go out and smoke on the balcony, although it was frowned on. And a lot of the students smoked, even though they weren't supposed to.
Susan, what is the year-round kind of, is it southern, like equivalent to Florida, or is it more like?
Not as hot as Florida. It's much more temperate. It's not as cold in the winter. Even in Annecy, it wasn't as cold in the winter as it is here. It's just much more temperate, I would guess.
It would be more like one of the southern states.
I think so. North Carolina, maybe.
Oh.
I don't know. Like my friends who lived in Wilmington had a pretty moderate climate. The students in the school had made welcome signs in English for all of our students. This was a trip in spring of 2023. I had also made 2 other trips, one in 2015 and one in 2019 with students. We had a little welcoming reception the first morning with croissants and cookies and orange juice. This was my wonderful group of UE students. Let's see. I don't know if that's better, I guess. They were just a wonderful group. The two young men and the 7 young women, and no problems. They were happy to be there. They stayed with a family for a little over a week, and then we had almost a week in Paris. And it's a really wonderful experience for them, and for me too. One day the teachers went out for lunch, and this is where we took our lunch. We bought sandwiches at a little boutique and sat and swung our feet on the edge of the of the quay and looked at the boats. And I stayed with one of the teachers who lived south of Arcachon on Biscarrosse Beach. And this was a picture I took on Easter Sunday morning. It was just a really beautiful, wild, the ocean is, the Atlantic Ocean there, there's no bay. So the Atlantic Ocean came right up to the beach. We had a farewell reception with all sorts of incredibly yummy things to eat. And at least one of the students is still in contact with her French friend. We call them the correspondant, and she's still in contact with her. Now, this is a friend I made who lived in the area. She was a social studies teacher, Françoise. She's on the far right, and her friend Anne and Anne's husband, and they took me for a picnic. There's a very famous painting, Déjeuner sur l'herbe, of people reclining on, in a funny circumstance, but it's a French thing. You bring your blanket, you bring your yummy food to eat, you find a shady place and you sit on the grass. It's common. So it was really lovely to stay with Françoise and her husband. And I went back to see them in the summertime after the exchange. This was something she shared with me that I found really interesting. These are artillery shells from World War I. And her great uncle was in the war, and the soldiers carved these in their spare time. And I just thought this was so unusual and so telling. An artillery shell is an evil thing. It's designed just to kill. But the soldiers, when they had a few spare minutes, they discovered they could do repoussé designs on them with a sharp instrument and make something beautiful out of these shells. And she said that every family in France has at least one. It made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, that in the midst of the horrors of the trench warfare in World War I, that the men had tried to make something beautiful come from their experience. It just seemed so sort of telling about human nature. And this picture, I took to show the scale of the size. There were some smaller ones and some larger ones. She had lived about a 7-minute walk to the beach, and this was a free exercise class every morning in the summer, a different class every day, Zumba, yoga, Pilates, and the instructor is in the red facing everybody, and everybody's on the beach doing their exercises. They had a program to teach children how to sail, and my American students last April, I didn't go on the trip, they all learned how to surf or had a chance to take a surfing lesson. So now we're going to leave Western France and Bordeaux and go down to Nice in the southeast. Nice is the third largest city. There's Paris, then Marseille, then Nice. And my daughter was living in the town of Cavaillon. Cavaillon is also the name of the region. She was in a very small town, comparable to Newark Valley, perhaps. And she had taken a position in a middle school and a high school, which I'll explain in a minute. And Cavaillon is noted for melons, mostly. The same way I think my grandfather used to really like melons from a particular part of New York State. But now I can't remember where. Honeydew melons, they came from a certain part of New York. Anyway, Cavaillon is famous for melons, and Eleanor was the only English-speaking person other than the teachers in the town. So what she was doing was a program called TAPIF, where when they teach languages in the schools in France, they will offer a paid position for a college graduate in Germany to help with the teacher of German, or from Italy to help with the teacher of Italian, or from the United States or Great Britain to help with the teachers of English. So the idea is that Eleanor would be in the classroom And when the professor would say, okay, you three all go have a conversation in English with Eleanor, she could help the teacher by speaking with the students and as a native speaker. So she could explain certain slang or customs that maybe the teacher wasn't 100% up with. So it was a 6-month program. She was there from October 2017 to March 2018. And the school found housing for her in an apartment building that was adjacent. French teachers are employed different to American teachers. Here in New York, I live in the Binghamton area. I wanted to become a teacher. I took the training and I applied for a job locally and I accepted a job in Endicott. In France, if you train as a teacher, the government hires you and you're an employee of the government and they send you where they need you. If you live in Nice and you want to get a job in Nice and they send you to Bordeaux, tough luck. You've got to live in Bordeaux during the week and then maybe come home on the weekends. So next to the high school was an apartment building where some of the teachers lived during the week. Then they go home to their families on the weekend. So one of my friends had told me it took her 3 or 4 years and then some political string pulling to get a job in her actual city where she lived with her husband. But it's a different system. This was the view from her window. We were there in December. It was the December after Jerry died. He had died in May that year, 2016. And so at Christmas, we didn't really know what to do with each other. And she was in France, so I went to see her. So as you can see, there's no snow. And again, there's on the seacoast, so it's warmer. I had a winter coat, but I didn't really need it. But what bothered me was the wind. There was this constant wind. I was only really there 5-6 days, but I don't think I could live there. It just was like, when is this noise going to stop? So Eleanor had made we had a little Christmas tree for us out of tissue paper. And I brought some gifts. We discovered the bakeries and things were open on the 24th, but then everything was closed the 25th, 26th, 27th, and so forth. They have a tradition with Santa Claus, but there's no chimneys. So since Santa can't come down the chimney, he rappels up the wall. So there are a lot of homes with little miniature Santas hanging on the wall as if they're climbing up on the roof to come in the house and bring presents. This is a picture of Eleanor. She was 22 at that time. When her French improved, her French was already very good. She had had very good training with Judy Wetzig at Binghamton High School and had gone to France twice as a high school student. And then she studied French at SUNY New Paltz. And when we were together in a store, when I spoke, people knew right away I was American. I'm told I have a strong American accent, although I try to do perfect French, but perfect French is difficult. But Eleanor, they would listen for a minute and then they would say in French, "Where are you from, madame?" Because they thought that she was French, but from a slightly different part of the country. So I was very impressed with how well she was doing with her French. This was a little mill town we visited where they had a restored paper mill that had been started in the 1700s. It reminded me a little of Owego, with the buildings right up to the edge of the river. There are many canals in French cities, and this was near where, because of rivers running through whatever. And since the French like to beautify things, I noticed this, this wonderful light display at Christmas time. I just thought it was really, they just have a knack for making things look nice. And making beautiful public spaces. It's not, and anybody can be there. You don't have to be rich. Anybody can walk through the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris. Anybody can go to some of these pretty spots and get kind of rejuvenated. I love to take pictures in the grocery stores.
Remember,
Oh dear.
You maybe know Sour Patch Kids candy. So this is how they translate Sour Patch Kids.
Very bad.
Uh, And then on the upper left, it says sour then sweet. Because that's the appeal of the candy, right? You bite into it and it's awful sour and then it gets sweet later. So I love French supermarkets and checking everything out. They all have the same barcodes and so forth that we do. But when you look at produce or anything, they'll tell you where it comes from. Does it come from Morocco? Does it come from Algeria? Does it come from a part of France? And they grow quite a lot of kiwis in France. I was with a friend driving out in the countryside near Bordeaux, and there was a big poster like with a kiwi on. I said, "What's that about?" She says, "Well, they grow all these fields. That's what's growing in these fields. It's kiwi fruit." I was like, "Oh, okay." This is a very cool program France has for its young people. Eleanor was issued one of these cards. This comes from the train system. SNCF stands for the train system. And students from the age of 21 to 26 to 27, students from 12 to 27, young people can ride the train for half price. They can also go into museums and galleries for free. They can also go to theatrical productions, operas, etc., for either reduced or very low. John's son lived in France as an adult, but so from 12 to 27, and then it ends on the day before their 28th birthday. We're starting to do that a little here locally. The Binghamton Philharmonic now offers free tickets to students 17 and younger. Actually, a member of my extended family has begun to love the Philharmonic because he was at the concert 2 weeks ago or last week when they did Beethoven's Seventh. So I'm going to share my subscription with him, with his family, so they can all come now.
I think Madrigal Choir also has free entry for youth.
Good, that's wonderful. No, so in France, this card, Eleanor looks a little like a deer in the headlights in this photo.
It was French.
But very French. She says when she traveled, particularly in Belgium, people asked if she was Dutch. And it's funny because on my mother's side, my grandmother was Dutch or had Dutch family. So I thought that was interesting. That when she was in Belgium, people thought she was Dutch. And so this little card cost 25 euros, and it was very useful for her. This was a little outdoor Christmas tree by a church. And this is interesting. Many of us have a little creche figure at Christmas time. In France, this can become much more elaborate, the way American families could have an electric train set that takes up a whole large table. A French family might have a creche set that takes up a whole table with many, many characters. And this story is about a local person who built them and created the characters. So in his case, he was doing figures with the older costumes, 17th century, 18th century, I'm not sure which, but very, very detailed. And here's a closer one with really nice details in the face and figures. The creches have long religious significance in France, particularly after the revolution, when going to church was forbidden for a time. And the revolutionaries tried to suppress the Christian religion. So people would have a creche in their homes on display, but they would hide the figure of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, because when the soldiers came, when the thought police came to see if they had any religious figures in their creche, they'd say, "Oh, no, we got rid of those, just like you said." And then when everybody left and they had private time, they could do a private service at home with the actual figure of the Christ child. So it became also a kind of political, religious, it was very important to people. Eleanor and I took a road trip to Nice from Cavaillon. It was a couple hours. One thing I noticed on the highways, at the rest stops, there's always a playground for children. It's different to American rest stops. And also in the rest area itself, you know how when you go to a truck stop or whatever, the aisles are really, really narrow and there's merchandise everywhere and there's everything from sunglasses to electronic equipment to candy and all sorts of stuff. The aisles are more spacious, the restrooms even are larger, and there are restaurants with really good, healthy foods. You can actually get a decent, healthy meal for less $45, you know, at a rest stop on the highway. I thought that was really civilized.
Yes.
So there's a profit motive, but not like 1,000%, you know. So anyway, we went to Nice. This is a little bit about food. I wasn't sure to include these pictures because they looked a little weird to me, but anyway, this is what you think of when you think of crepes, you know, because you can have sweet ones or savory ones, but generally, you know, you get, when I do these with my students, they all want to slather them with Nutella and then put marshmallows on top, you know. But these are the white flour crepes. And then in Nice and in other areas of France, you can get buckwheat crepes, which are a little different. Galette de blé noir, and they fold them into a square. And this one had a fried egg in the middle. And you can get, they're good with ham and cheese and parsley, and they're not bad. And they're just a little different.
When we were in France, Daniel ate crepe morning, afternoon, night. The first night we got there, I think he got double service.
Double portions.
So much that he couldn't even finish it. You know. That's why I was laughing, because yes, they can taste very nice and they can be creative with them. Surprisingly, the guy who was making it was from India.
Really?
Mhm.
So I want to explain for Kate, if she couldn't hear, that one of our church members, Teddy, says when he traveled in France, his son really liked crepes and would order them all the time, and that the person who made the crepes was from India.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, and Kate, if you have questions, just speak up.
Okay, I will.
Okay. This was on the Boulevard des Anglais in Nice. The British, you know, had their sort of colonial territorial fingers on things for a long time. And of course, this is the beautiful boulevard along the side of the ocean. And it's still the Boulevard des Anglais. It's still the English walkway.
Hmm.
You know, they haven't changed the name, which surprised me a little bit. And my grandmother and grandfather had vacationed here in the early part, in the maybe the late teens, 1920s, probably before the war, certainly. And this was a small personal memorial that had been left for one of the terror attack in 2016. It was one of those awful incidents where a person drives a van into a crowd of people. And it was very touching to me, you know, because it was local people. It was just ordinary people out walking on the boulevard that night when the guy drove his van into the crowd. So in December, some friends had left a memorial on the sidewalk. This was the Matisse Museum. We had a nice afternoon there. I love the colors of it. I love the outside. The outside looks a little bit like a Matisse painting.
Yeah.
And he built in the 60s. He had a religious conversion toward the end of his life, and in Saint Paul de Vence, which is a small town outside Nice, he actually designed and had a chapel constructed with all the, and he designed the stained glass windows, and he designed the cross and the altar fixtures, and that's really quite amazing. The Matisse chapel. Eleanor and I didn't see it, but I had seen it before with my parents when they had taken me to France when I was young. So here's one of his beautiful designs, when he was older. He was doing the paper cutouts because he had such bad arthritis in his hands, he couldn't hold a paintbrush. So he would have cut out paper or have an assistant help him. Now we're going to leave Nice and go to Annecy in the eastern part of France. The I would fly to, I made several trips there. I would fly to Geneva, Switzerland, which was the nearest big airport, and then take a bus, which took about an hour and a half to get from Geneva, Switzerland to Annecy. So here's a map of the lake. It's kind of like Ithaca, but with taller mountains. It's just really, really beautiful. It's smaller than Cayuga Lake, quite a bit smaller. I meant to look up how big it actually is, but I think it's about a third as long as Cayuga Lake, more like 8-10 miles, not, because Seneca Lake's 40 miles. But anyway, it's just a beautiful city. It's growing fast because it's so desirable. So I was there in October, and it was warm enough that these people were out paddleboarding, and I just loved it. I love the. Can you see that the man on the blue paddleboard has his little Jack Russell Terrier with him? And so I took a number of pictures that day because it was such a beautiful day, and people were out enjoying the water. The swimming season was over. There were all sorts of signs saying no swimming, but there were people right by the sign swimming. In the 60s, the French began a very strict environmental protection for this particular lake. They do allow motorboats, which surprised me, because I know that in some Adirondack lakes, they didn't used to allow motorboats. Maybe they do now. But in any case, it's known as one of the cleanest lakes in Europe. And the people think the color is doctored in this photograph, but it's not. It's just this actual incredible turquoise that you can see right through to the bottom, to the pebbly bottom. It's just really glorious. There are also canals in the city, complete with swans. They call it the Venice of the North. And it's just, in the medieval old city, it's really very charming, and with all these canals. And again, the big park that faces on the lake, it's not separated, like in Geneva, New York, there's a beautiful park, but it's separated by like a 4-lane highway. You have to get to it. The park in the south end of Cayuga Lake by Ithaca is a little nicer. And the city of Annecy had a nice park where you couldn't really buy anything. It wasn't commercialized at all. You know, you just walked and enjoyed the park. There wasn't like a hot dog vendor and an ice cream vendor and a souvenir vendor and a this and a that all over. Just go there and not spend money. Just go there and walk. I was very impressed with that. I don't know, it's just a different attitude that the French seem to have. Again, we've got just a random swan swimming under the dock, and these girls just enjoying the sunshine. This was a really wonderful thing I observed. First of all, the footpath around the lake. There's a footpath where you can walk around the entire perimeter of the lake, which you can't do, for example, in Seneca Lake or Cayuga Lake. But they maintain a footpath, and I would walk on it. I never walked around the whole lake, but I would walk until I got tired, and then I'd wait for the city bus and go back into town. And it was easy to get a bus pass. I could get a senior bus pass that was a little cheaper than ordinary. And then also what's really interesting about the buses, when you get on the bus, you say hello to the driver, and the driver doesn't do anything with the money. There's somebody else who's the controller, who sort of checks every now and then to see if people are, what they call it, validating the pass. You have to put the pass next to this electronic ticket taker, and it beeps. And then your pass says, 5 left instead of 7, whatever. And sometimes people don't put their pass, but the driver doesn't have any concern with it. The driver isn't like looking over his shoulder to make sure people are paying. He's just driving. And then every now and then maybe a controller will come on and sort of watch, and then everybody will mind their P's and Q's. But you get on, you say hello to the bus driver. When you get off, you say, even if he's at the front of the bus or he or she is at the front, and you're at the back, you always say, thank you, goodbye. Everybody does. And it's so nice because it reminds you that the bus driver is not an anonymous civil servant. He's a community member just like you are. You know, you could run into him at the pharmacy or her. And the woman, a woman bus driver that I had a chance to talk with, beautifully made up, gorgeous nail polish, nice outfit, just done to the nines. And she just was so happy and doing her job. And I talked to her a little and she said, well, 5-6 years, she did one job. Now 5-6 years, she was going to be a bus driver and she was going to try something else. She didn't seem to have any anxiety about leaving a job and taking another job. And she just sort of wanted to try some different trades and see how she liked them. And it was, I thought that was interesting. So anyway, back to the footpath. So I was walking along on a Monday and I saw these little kayaks. So I stopped and watched and took a lot of pictures. And it was a school outing. It was a Monday. Those kids were in school and this was their gym class. And they were little kids.
Oh, that'd be a fun gym class.
Incredible. Wouldn't that be so cool?
Yeah.
They're little. They all had their caps and their life jackets, and there were like 4 or 5 instructors. And so they were learning, and there were
Kids.
there were African kids, immigrant kids, as well as French kids. And I thought they looked about 8 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
And they were all learning how to maneuver the paddle and the kayak. And they were listening to the instructors and they were learning how to maneuver. So they milled around for a while, checking it out and learning how to do it. And then at a certain command, they all got themselves lined up again.
Oh,
And I just thought it was such a wonderful, wonderful lesson. You know, it was a warm day in October and the kids were learning that the success of the group depends upon the success of the individual. The success and safety of the individual depends on the success and safety of the group, that instructions are important to listen to, but that you'll get a chance to mess around on your own and find your own way, but that if you pay attention and do what the teacher says, you'll be safe. And then it also taught them that the lake is a beautiful resource to it be enjoyed and to protect. And so when they grow up as teenagers and adults, they'll remember, oh, I went out on that lake. I'm not going to let anybody build an oil refinery on that lake. I remember kayaking when I was a child. You know what I mean? It just touched me. So what the level of learning that was happening in this particular exercise, because as a teacher, particularly in a middle school, you know, you were constantly attempting to have authority over the children and not getting it because they wouldn't respect your questions and your demands. And so, and as the minute the bell rang, there's chaos in the halls. And this was so different. And so, of course, I mentioned it when I got home to the principal at the high school. He just shook his head. You know, there's no way. For one thing, there's no school in the summer here. And in the fall, it gets too cold too quick. And with New York State liability, you couldn't take a bunch of kids up to Whitney Point and teach them how to kayak. Or could you? You could? Rick says yes. Rick says yes. He has done?
When we were living in Vermont, little kids, like 1st, 2nd grade, winter time, free pass, they take them to go ski for exercise, for PE.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Unfortunately, we left to go to the Virgin Islands before Daniel started school. He will have learned to ski well.
Okay. And Rick, what's your experience been?
There are some wonderful paddling instructors, and you gave a beautiful synopsis, really, of why it's important to bring not just young people, but all people to the water as a resource that we can all care for. Anyway, local teachers have brought up the kids in elementary school. You said they were young kids. And when you teach them young, it becomes part of their lifestyle, and the outdoors becomes part of their inside and voting and caring. But yes, there are local things. I spent over 20 years teaching the college age kids, the 17 to 25-year-old crowd, to go from 0 to whitewater in 6 weeks.
Oh, that's so super.
And did that for many, many years. Quite wonderful, really. These boats are old school whitewater kayaks. And I'll tell you what that means sometime.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better because I came back thinking it was too bad people didn't do that, but obviously I'm wrong. People can do that here.
Not many.
Okay, well, and I guess because I've never done it. Although I was very fortunate. My parents had a summer home on Seneca Lake when I grew up. And we had canoeing and little sunfish sailing and cape boat sailing and water skiing, and that was great. But anyway, I just thought this was really super. It's a lovely mountainous region. It's quite, as I said, it's only an hour and a half from Geneva, and it used to be part of Switzerland.
Yeah.
So the state flag actually is a lot like the Swiss national flag. It's called the Haute Savoie, or the High Savoy region. Another picture of the lake. Hard not to take pictures of the lake. I love this tree. I went back, took pictures of it in different seasons. I was there in October and again in February, and once on New Year's Day when there were some people swimming in the lake doing a polar bear challenge. This one particular man was swimming and his friends were like, "It's been 15 minutes, get the heck out of the water." Anyway,
What kind of a tree is it, Susan?
I would have absolutely no idea.
That's
That's a good question.
amazing. It's just absolutely amazing.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah.
So, then I was so inspired by the lake, I wanted to go swimming. So I found a really cool indoor pool that I could take the bus to and change and go swimming. That was fun. And again, I got a senior pass. It was very inexpensive. They had a festival that year in October. I just happened to be there at the right weekend because it's a modern French city with telecommunications and malls and glass and steel and stuff, but they remember their past like as an alpine village a long time ago now. So they had this return from the Alpine Meadows celebration where I missed it, but they actually had a parade with the cows through the city.
Mm.
And they like to have festivals in this city. There's a big festival in February for Carnival where they pretend it is Venice and they dress up in Venetian masks and clothes. And they have a very important film festival in the summer. I was there during the film festival, but you had to have a resident pass. And mostly I just watched enviously as people stood in line to see really cool movies. Because it's not quite as big as the Cannes Festival, but it's a decent, so seems like a city full of people who know how to live, and really enjoy living. This was a person making reblochon cheese, which is the kind you cut up and melt for fondue. And I was watching because it took him a long time to force it into the mold, and everybody was watching him. The cheese was bigger than the wooden mold he was trying to put it in. And they were selling, beer and soft drinks and snacks and, the usual things like at a fair. This was where I would go on Saturday morning and get I could get eggs and yogurt and so forth. It was surrounded, so what this means is the Epany farm was the name of the little neighborhood where I was living, kind of like visiting Binghamton, but staying in Vestal. And it says milk products, direct sale from the farmer every Saturday morning here. So I liked it a lot. This was how they sold the eggs. Eggs aren't refrigerated in Great Britain or in France because they process them differently. In the United States, we wash them off and remove the protective coating, but in France, they leave it on, so they don't really have to be refrigerated. So then you could get 6 at a time, which was good, which I prefer. It's hard to get a half dozen eggs here now.
They don't refrigerate the eggs in Mexico either. I wonder if that's the reason why.
Must be the same. And then I like the sheep outside the window. And it was surrounded by all condominium developments, and it might go that way because the city's growing so fast, but it was really charming because farm in the middle of the condominium developments. Then this is a really beautiful, beautiful chateau, and Saint Bernard, I was told that this is the area where the Saint Bernard dog came from. And this chateau has been in the same family. They started to build it in 923, and it's been in the same family ever since.
Hmm. Amazing.
And the men who've been have been the leaders of the family have also been leaders in the French government, especially during World War II. And it's extraordinary. I wasn't there on the right day. I didn't time it right. I wasn't able to go inside, but I walked around the outside. I actually hiked up the hill, which was quite a project. But you could take the city bus down to the little town and then hike up, or if I had rented a car, I could have driven up. But it's quite beautiful. And then there was a nice little, in my little neighborhood, there was a nice little street fair one Saturday, like the Apple Fest. You know, they had an Apple Fest up in Syracuse yesterday. They had a little mini Apple Fest with a clown. They had a climbing wall for the little kids. And this was very interesting. It was a carousel, and the man under the tent is on a bicycle setting, and he was riding the bike, but the energy from the bike ride was making the carousel go around so the kids could spin in the air. So he's doing the bicycle. And here's the result where the kids can, the centrifugal force, the kids can fly around on the outside. Like that, because it was so low tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had people, the men were running the apple press, and the women were selling the juice in recycled plastic bottles. And they had they were roasting a pig, and then they had bread and cheese and great stuff to eat. And it was a really nice little neighborhood, a nice little neighborhood festival. This was the view when I stepped outside my Airbnb, and the air was different. The air was much more pure. I mentioned it to somebody who lived there, and they said they didn't notice anymore, but I noticed. The air was just beautiful. And this was another view on one of my walks to the shopping center, to the mall. They had the commercial, the old town's not really developed, and then outside they put the malls and the big box stores, and they had a number of American chains. They had a Subway sandwich for them. I was surprising. There wasn't any McDonald's though in this city. There's McDonald's and Kentucky Fried next to each other in Paris, but and the quality of the McDonald's is much better in the United States. Well, I haven't eaten in a McDonald's hamburger in probably 45 years, but the McDonald's in Paris is okay. My little apartment had a balcony. French homes don't generally have dryers. They have washing machines, but not dryers. So you need the balcony to dry your clothes. And I took some other little pictures of where I stayed. Just not a hotel, but an Airbnb. It was an apartment. I was the only tourist. It was a residential building. I was the only tourist. And the owners lived in a different apartment. So there was a small little kitchenette and a little place to eat. And I liked these pots and pans. There's the variable skillet and saucepan and the variable sizes and one handle for all of them. So it's much easier to store it in a drawer. It's just the one handle fits on everything.
Wow.
That's my problem at home. How do you nest the pots when the handles get in the way? So I thought that was very clever.
Listen,
Yeah, certain things are well thought out.
Yeah.
This was one of the decorations. It means life is a flower of which the fruit is love. I thought that was really beautiful. So
Beautiful, yeah.
life is a flower of which the fruit is love. From Victor Hugo. And then a wedding picture to go with that. A couple posing for photographs. And then on my last day, I didn't want to leave. I was still taking pictures. I flew home from Geneva. So this is one of the last pictures I took. I thought this guy was so interesting. With his little dog in his arm. All in black with the fluffy white dog. He was talking on his phone. And then this was in the airport also. Chairs gathered around not an actual fire, but the computerized image of a fire on a screen. So that concludes the show.